questions that they want to ask before I start even? Okay, so obviously, we're not in person or anything, but I really encourage you. You can unmute yourself, ask questions throughout, stop me. I may or may not see you because I have some one or two sources I have on my computer. So at some point I might pull it up, and just in case I don't see you trying to get my attention, just interrupt me at any time. If I'm not clear, especially one of the sources. I don't know if anybody got to the source from Shmuel Beis at the very end, but that one's in particular pretty confusing. So if at any time I didn't clarify anything, stop me. So we start in the Torah in Shmos in Parshas Mishpatim, which is the parsha that deals with damages in the Torah. And there's this pasuk, or these few psukim, this call it 4 psukim in a row, starting with the last pasuk in Perek Chaf Aleph, and then it kind of Perek Chaf Bet kind of starts mid-sentence. That's why I started from the pasuk before. And it deals with this very interesting topic that has pages and pages, chapters of Gemara just based on these couple psukim here. So I'm just gonna quickly go through some of the psukim. I know when I put it on your source sheet, I put Rashi's throughout. I'll just read the psukim straight, so kind of hopefully make it as clear as possible. So pasuk Lamed Zayin starts with, if you have a person who steals an ox or a sheep and he shechts it or he sells it, he has to pay 5 times for an ox, the value of what he stole, and 4 times for a sheep for the value of what he stole. And that is beyond the capacity of this year. There's also pages and pages of Gemara about what it means, why you have to pay 4 and 5, but we won't get to that right now. Then the next pasuk, which is the first pasuk of Chaf Bet, says that if you have a thief who's tunneling into someone's house, and he's caught as he's tunneling and he's killed, ein lo damim, and we're going to focus on that in a moment, what that means. But literally it means he has no blood, and I'll get back to that in a second. Okay, pasuk Bet says, and this also is extremely important, is that it says if the sun rose on him, damim lo, he has blood. Shalem yishalem im ein lo v'nimkar b'gnevato. So he has to pay back, he has to make restitution, and if he doesn't have the money to pay back what he stole, or what, presumably if he stole something he can give it back, so it probably means what he broke, then he's sold into slavery for his theft. And then I gave you one more pasuk here. Im himatzeti matzei biyado agneva mishor al chamar otzeh chayim shnayim yishalem. If what he stole is still alive and in his possession, he pays double. So just a couple comments about what it says in the Torah. Number one is this concept of ein lo damim and yesh lo damim. So if you saw, I gave you some Rashi there. It's based on the Gemara that I gave also. This concept is essentially as follows, that there's an idea in the brought in the Torah and then discussed heavily in the Gemara, the concept of a rodef. This is probably a concept that many of you are familiar with, and it's essentially that if someone is chasing after someone else to kill that person, that then the chaser, so the guy that's the instigator in this case, is considered a rodef. And for the purpose of conversation right now, anybody, any witness or the victim himself or herself is allowed to kill that chaser, to kill the person who's the assailant or the thief or the murderer in this case. Now, the lashon of the pasuk, the wording of the pasuk is that ein lo damim, he has no blood, which literally means, and if you saw the Rashi, it literally means that it's not considered murder to kill that person. Um, when the Torah talks about murder, the very first time is in last week's parsha, not yesterday, but a week ago, is the very first time that humanity is instructed not to murder. And it says, Shofech dam ha'adam bi'adam damo yishafech, which literally translates as someone who spills the blood of a person.
Anyone else having trouble hearing?
Yeah, I am.
Chris, you muted for some reason.
What? Give me 1 second. I'm just going to.
We hear you now, though.
Okay, I'm just. It says now that my internet connection isn't stable, so I'm just going to switch to hotspot so that we won't have any issues. So just give me 1 second, and then I might leave the Zoom and then come back in if it cuts me off. So just give me a second. All right, that should be better. Okay, so I'll just repeat that last point. I don't know how long I was muted for, but there's this idea of ein lo damim, which, like I said, it literally means like it's okay to murder that person, and it based on this pasuk from last week's parsha that I said that if you spill someone's blood, your blood is spilt. So when you kill this person, it's like ein lo damim, you didn't spill any blood. There's another ramification of a person being ein lo damim, having no blood, is as follows. And I don't know how much of the sources you saw, so I'll just give the shir as if it doesn't really matter if you saw them or not. But there's a Gemara that also discusses this concept of if let's say I'm a thief and I'm tunneling into someone's house. So the pasuk establishes that I have no blood. Now what I already said is like point number one that we have to like know is 100% clear is anybody can kill me and it's not considered murder. There's no problem if someone kills me. But also, if I do something in this act, I'm not really a human being at the time that this happens. And that's also like an important part of this. I'm considered like not a person because of if anyone can kill me. If something else happens while I'm in this tunnel going into someone's house, I'm not responsible. So the example given in the Gemara is, let's say I'm tunneling into someone's house, and I break a vase while I'm in their house. I steal a bunch of stuff, but while I'm stealing stuff, I break a vase, and I get out. Nobody killed me. I got out scot-free. Now, a month later, I get caught. And this is the question of the Gemara. The question of the Gemara is, a month later I get caught. And assume for a second, just for discussion's sake, I have a vase in my possession and I broke one while I was in someone's house. The question is, do I have to pay for what I have in my possession now? And do I have to pay for what I broke while I was in someone's house and I stole some stuff? And the pasuk that I read a minute ago clearly says that if I'm caught with the items in my possession, I have to give it back. But the pasuk never says if I break something while I'm in there, because the Torah establishes that I'm not like really a human being when I go in there, I'm not responsible if I break stuff while I'm in there. Now, there are many, many exceptions, and it's a little bit more complicated than I made it, but so far, I hope does anyone have any questions or not understand? Okay. So one of the psukim I read also is extremely important. It teaches us a lot, where it says, Im zarcha hashemesh alav. If the sun rose on the thief, it becomes yesh lo damim. He becomes like that, he becomes human again. And the question is why and what the implications are of this pasuk. So the way that the Gemara explains it is as follows, that the reason that a thief is not a human is because of the following premise, and it gets a little bit confusing here. So please stop me at any time if there's any confusion. But it's also very interesting the way it works. Is the Torah looks at it as follows: a thief who's going into someone's house isn't necessarily a murderer. Thieves aren't murderers. Thieves are just people who need stuff. The reason that we assume that every thief who's tunneling into someone's house is a murderer is because there's an assumption, a chazaka, that a homeowner isn't going to allow someone to just rob their property. There's this and we'll get to the ramifications of this later on, but there's this rule that if I own a house and I have property, I'm not going to let anyone in to steal my property. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to defend my property. I'm going to quote unquote stand my ground. I'm going to protect my house using any means necessary. Because I'm going to protect my house using any means necessary, the thief coming in knows that I'm going to kill him. And once he knows that I'm going to kill him, he's going to come using lethal force to kill me. Meaning the only reason we're allowed to kill the thief is because let's say it's, consider for a second that I'll switch for a second. Well, I'll keep it actually just to be clear. I'm a thief. I'm going into someone's house. The only reason I'm considered a rodef and I'm not considered a human is because I assume that someone's going to chase after me and kill me. And so I could protect myself by killing him, which means he could protect himself by killing me. And it's kind of this circular logic, and it gets a little bit confusing. And also the Gemara, the Rishonim, the Mefarshim have tons of discussions on what the meaning of this is. But I'll talk about a few different nafkamina, a few different implications of this. Any questions so far? Anything that people want me to clarify? Okay. So this concept of im zarcha hashemesh alav, if the sun
Can I just
shines.
go back for a second?
Yeah, you look.
Go ahead.
Well, you said something earlier about how he's not really considered a human when he goes into the house. So I saw that in Rashi for the purposes of, it being murder or not, that he's dead when he walks in. But are there other implications in terms of damage or other halacha?
Yeah. There's I don't know, maybe I cut out before when I was saying, but yeah, 100%. There's the big implication that the Gemara says is that if I damage something while I'm in there, I don't have to pay for what I damaged.
Right now, so you mentioned that, and I was wondering about that because I thought that in general you only have to, pay for the worst thing you're charged with. We don't punish you for multiple things at a time.
But let's say for a second, it's a great question, Teal, but let's say for a second that's the worst thing I did there. So
that the vase that you broke was more expensive than the thing you stole?
It could be.
Okay.
It could
I'm just clarifying. I'm not.
Or I get away with nothing. I mean, you could have a case where I go into someone's house, and this is all based on, and what the Gemara says is it's all based on the fact that I'm risking my life to do this. Anyone could kill me, and it's kind of a trade-off. Because I'm putting my life on the line to do this, the Torah makes it that that I'm not responsible for damage that I do. Now, I am responsible for things that I stole. And the distinction is twofold, and that's what I'm getting at here with this pasuk of im zarcha shemesh alav is once I leave the house or once the sun rises, my life is no longer at risk. And so there's an opinion in the Gemara, and I didn't give you this Gemara because it would have been way too much. But there's an opinion in the Gemara that says that he wouldn't even be responsible for anything he does while he's in there. Once you're risking your life, you're not responsible to repay what you stole. But everyone rejects that and says that's ludicrous, it's insane because the Torah says otherwise. How could you have that opinion? And so there's basically thrown out the window that it makes no sense. However, what I damage while I'm in there is accepted as halacha, that because I'm going in and I'm risking my life to do it, if I damage some stuff while I'm in there, you know what, too bad for the homeowner, which is pretty crazy to think about. But I wouldn't have to pay back because I'm not a status of a human. The reason I do have to pay back my other stuff, the Gemara says, is that once I leave, the sun rises, my life is no longer at risk. I am a human, and there's a pasuk in the Torah that says that there's an obligation in the Torah that I have to return a stolen property. So when you steal something, you're obviously violating the one of the Aseret Dibro not to steal, but you're also violating a mitzvah say when you don't return the object, because I have to return a lost object, and the second that I leave the house, my life is no longer at risk. I have this obligation to return it, but technically, anything that happens while I'm in there, I wasn't even a human being. Like I wasn't even a person, so I'm not found responsible.
Even if the thing is more of value, like even the thing that you break is more valuable, like than the thing you stole.
Yes.
You still have to pay it back. That's ludicrous.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy. But that's the conclusion of the Gemara. I don't think I brought it up here, but I'll just confirm that that's the. I'll confirm probably after. I don't want to look it up now, but I'll confirm that that's the sheet. That's what the Shulchan Aruch agrees on. But I'm pretty sure that that's the case. If I'm wrong about that, I'll send a message out. I'll email everyone to clarify. But I'm pretty sure that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. That's the conclusion of the Gemara. Which again, yeah, it's pretty crazy. But it's because of this concept of ein lo damim. And yeah, Sophia, you have a question?
Yeah, so I guess like for something like Shabbat, where you can like override Shabbat in order to save a life, I guess because there's competing values going on, I guess. The part that I find, I don't know why it necessarily made that correlation, but then here, like it's true that they're risking their lives in order to go steal, but like it was their choice to do that. Like I'm not sure I see in the same kind of competition values I see in other halachic spaces, and it's weird to me that we're giving them some kind of compensation because it's like they still decided to steal something. It's not like they had to do this.
Yeah, I should have clarified. There's a very important point here. If the thief can reasonably assume that his life is not at risk for a few reasons, let's say the homeowner's not there, or he knows the guy, or it's a relative. If there's an assumption on the thief and you could prove it, that his life was not actively at risk when he did this, he would be responsible. It's because of the following. Like, imagine for a second a case, and I agree with you that in this case a little bit the thief becomes kind of like the victim, we'll call it, and I also like that bothers me also. But imagine for a second that there was a true victim being chased, and bumps into something along the way. Like, they wouldn't be responsible for that. Once the thief is putting his life in active risk and putting himself in the line of fire, we say, like, okay, if he bumps into something along the way, he wouldn't have to pay because he was like running away for his life. Even though you're right, he started it, because he's running away for his life, he wouldn't have to do it. Now, I don't know how we would determine, like, if someone and the level to which someone was certain that their life wasn't at risk, but presumably, like, if the thief didn't come in armed, or if the homeowner wasn't home, or again, if they knew each other, which is like directly in the Gemara, like if they knew each other, there's only one case that the Gemara actually says you can be 100% certain won't end fatally, which is like a parent won't ever kill their child. That's what it says, which I guess has been proven throughout history to not always be the case, but the Gemara seems to prove that a parent will never kill a child. Anyone else, like even a friend, might kill each other, but this is only an exemption for someone who's like putting their life in active risk. And so I understand the frustration, but the reason it's there is because their life is so at risk. It's as if they're like running away from a murderer and bump into something to save their own life. So I do agree that, like, the instigator is becoming a little bit the victim, but that's what the Torah says. Tehila, go ahead.
What's the halacha if the case is flipped? Like, what if the balabait comes after the ganav and in an attempt to protect himself, the ganav kills the balabait? Is the ganav charged with murder?
So it's a
Or
great
does that
question.
count as like, because it kind of is like Kam Lar Gachash Gam Lar Go, except you broke into his house.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm gonna give. I'm gonna talk about that in a few minutes. So I'm gonna talk about that in a few minutes. There are a few cases that are similar. One of them, the case from Shmuel Bet, is somewhat similar. It gets complicated. It kind of depends, but essentially, like, if the thief is coming in and the homeowner, to protect himself, uses lethal force and the thief kills him, and it's like directly in the same action, and the thief is killing the homeowner since he's instigating the whole thing, he would be responsible, but it's not always super clear, and so we'll get to a few cases that'll.
Okay, I just thought it might be a potential raya for seeing the thief as a victim in certain circumstances.
Yeah, but you are correct that question is brought up, and it's complicated, and it's not always clear that, yeah, once, even in this case, like, once someone goes into a situation, even if like they're the instigator, they could become the victim, and that's the case in Shmuel Bet is, and again, like, it's understood in many different ways, so it's not like such a super clear case, and there's a lot of machloka based on it, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Any other questions? Okay, so there's an important Gemara in Sanhedrin that was on the source sheet that quotes the ruling of Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul, who says that if you're able to save yourself by injuring the rodef instead of killing them, you have to do that. You're not permitted to murder the rodef. And if you do, you're a murderer. If you could have used non-lethal force and you choose to use lethal force, you're considered a murderer. Now, there's a very vague and unclear Rambam that I don't know how many of you saw, but it's very interesting, that leaves more questions than it answers, that says this. It says that one who kills when they could have taken a non-lethal shot, it's considered murder, and they're chayav mita. However, ein beit din mimitinoto. Beit din does not prosecute such a case. Beit din doesn't kill them. And it falls under a category of mita bidei shemayim. At least seemingly, it falls under a category of mita bidei shemayim, that we say, like, that person's liable to be killed. We don't prosecute it. We leave it to Hashem to exact punishment. So there's a few reasons why that's the case. And it's like, it's not super clear. The Rambam doesn't really explain why he says that. And based on this Rambam, we're going to have a lot of other discussions. But the Kesef Mishnah says that the reason the Rambam says this is actually like a very practical reason, is because in order for Beit Din ever to kill a person, you need to have edut, which is witnesses, and warning, hasra, also. So in this case, we say there's no way there was proper warning, and the warning needs to be very clear. It needs to be clear, like, anytime the Torah says you get killed for doing X, so let's say you break Shabbos, you get killed, which is, like, in today's day and age, is something that, like, sounds preposterous. Like, you intentionally break Shabbos, that person would be killed in the time of Sanhedrin. So but anytime the Torah says that, you need witnesses, and the witnesses need to warn the person, saying, if you do this action, Beis Din is going to put you to death, and then the person needs to acknowledge the warning and the witnesses and say, I know, I'm going to do it anyways. And so that's why Beit Din very rarely put someone to death, because, like, the Torah wanted to make very clear and very sure that when someone is doing something wrong, that they're very intentional about what they're doing wrong, and that they know that what they're doing is liable to be put to death. So the Kesef Mishnah says, in this case, there's no way there was proper warning, because the person's doing this out of self-defense. And so nobody's going to stop and be like, wait, if you kill him, you're going to be put to death. But no, because he's just doing it to save himself. And so, according to the Kesef Mishnah, in a case where you potentially would have Hasra, then that person would be prosecuted, but it's so impractical that we would never say that that's the case. Any questions on that? Okay, so there's a I'm gonna quote a Rashi on the Gemara, and then I'm gonna quote a different Rashi on the Torah that people, at least one Rishon seems to say is a contradiction in Rashi, and he doesn't really answer how to rectify this. But Rashi feels that there's a difference between the person being pursued and another person that's standing around. Rashi's opinion is as follows, that if I'm being chased, if I'm the victim, I don't have to worry about shooting at the legs or protecting someone by injuring him. I'm allowed to take the fatal shot anytime because it's my life. I'm not going to have enough time to like sit there and think, wait, how do I save myself only breaking his limb? Rashi says if you're the victim, you can assume that the victim can do whatever they want to protect themselves. But if you're not the victim, then you have to go for the non-lethal option. There's a Rashi in the Torah in the story of Yaakov and Esav that the night before Yaakov's confrontation with Esav, Yaakov was davening and he was very nervous, and he was very afraid. And what was he afraid of? Obviously of like Esav hurting him, but Yaakov was also scared that he was going to have to kill. So Yaakov was very nervous that he was going to have to use lethal force and kill someone. And so there's a Rishon, his name is the Re'aim, comments and says, why was it that Yaakov was nervous that he was going to have to kill? Because the only reason Yaakov would have killed is if Esav tried to kill him. And in that case, he's allowed to kill Esav. Like he has no responsibility not to kill Esav because he's a victim in this case. So he says that he was nervous, Yaakov was nervous, not that he would have to kill Esav, but that he would have to kill Esav's men and Esav's soldiers. And he was thinking as follows. Esav was going to go after him. And he was thinking Esav's soldiers were going to go after his family. So Yaakov was going to kill Esav, no problem, because he was the victim. But the soldiers were going to go after his family, and now Yaakov's a witness. And according to the opinion that you're allowed to kill only if you're the victim and not if you're a witness. If you're a witness, you have to try and take the non-lethal shot. Yaakov was nervous that how's he going to figure out when it's okay to kill and when it's okay to take the non-lethal shot. This was keeping him awake at night, not knowing who am I going to be able to kill and who am I not going to be able to kill. But still, like, we see this clear distinction between the victim himself and the victim, like, and a witness to a crime. That according to this, like, when I'm a victim, I have a lot more rights to protect myself immediately. Any questions on that? Comments, questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I mean, this kind of makes me think of, unfortunately, of the story that took place in Israel in Gush Etzion a couple years ago with Ari Fold, and he was stabbed, and someone else shot. I mean, actually, he shot the guy who stabbed him, but like a lot of other people, whipped out their guns and tried to kill this guy. And their lives were just, even though they weren't the victim, like they weren't the one who was stabbed, like I'm sure this guy would have equally gone and like hurt them, either because they're getting in his way or just because he's a murderer. So I feel like even someone who's like, even in the case with Yaakov, like he's trying to protect his family, like Esav's men might still try to kill him just to get him out of the way. So like in a sense, he really is a victim also, or
right.
Could become one.
So there's a there's a Rav Yosef Shaul Nathanson. He wrote a sefer called the Madura Tzilasa, and lived in the 19th century. I saw this quoted by someone says that the distinction is actually like, it's very different when someone is ambushed versus not ambushed, but like in the course of a fight, where in an ambush you have very little time to react and to do something, and when you have very little time to react, you wouldn't be responsible for killing someone. So in a case of being a witness to a crime that's about to happen, you don't necessarily need to be worried about not being the victim yourself and killing a person. But maybe when you have a little more time to react, I don't know what the case would be, but when you have a little more time to react, and you have to decide, do I kill this person and do I not? So then you have to go for the non-lethal option. But I would assume in that case, when you have like a terrorist coming at someone and you don't have much time, so you do whatever is necessary to kill. But also, like, on the flip side, all the time in Israel, you have like cases of where soldiers will neutralize or kill a terrorist, and people will say like, why didn't they shoot at the legs? And this happens like, I have a friend who actually once, when he was in the army, he shot at some people who were like threatening him and his other soldiers, and he shot at them, and he didn't kill them, but he told me it was like weeks and weeks and weeks of inquiries and court cases, and like trying to determine, was it absolutely necessary to fire your gun? And so like, even today, where we would all say like, okay, in the case of Ari Fold, anyone who's around, shoot the person. If you shoot that person, like the country, the IDF is going to put you through the ringer to make sure that like you had absolutely no other choice, which would be the case in Canada also, potentially, that you would be like really grilled to make sure that you had zero other options in this case. And if you had any other option, you would have taken it. I mean, look at, I can't remember his name, but just a couple months ago in the summer, when there was a guy who was in an altercation with the police, grabbed a knife, and the cop shot him 8 times in the back. And so around the world, there were protests and riots that the cop should have shot him in the legs. And again, I'm not going to get into like, what's right and wrong in that case, because all these cases have so much into them that like it wouldn't be the right forum to discuss that. But it's complicated. It's very complicated. Like, did the cop have the right to shoot? I think like a lot of people would say yes, because the guy grabbed a knife. But were there other things he could have done? They tried a taser, it didn't work. And so were there other things that could have been done? And they're going to be like, the rest of their lives, it's going to follow those people around, potentially like, forever, to determine if they did everything in their power not to kill. Any other questions?
I guess
I don't know if I can answer that one.
I just have something. I guess what's ironic, both in this legal sense of like, if you're in the army or whatever, police, and also in the case of the robber, is that we're putting so much more pressure on the innocent guy who like, shot or, did something just to protect himself, and, grilling him. Like how much grilling goes into like the guy who literally just entered someone else's home to go and steal, or, this terrorist who went to, kill someone. Like, I don't think he goes through the same kind of, process of like shame.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. The counter argument to that is that the Torah says like ein lo damim, that anyone can kind of kill that person, and without any, like, the guy doesn't have a trial and a jury, just like anyone can like jump in and kill the person. there are cases of like people that in Toronto when we had that terrorist attack a few years ago, and the van on Yonge Street went and killed nine people. That guy afterwards was trying to commit suicide by the police. Like he was trying to pretend like he had a gun, and he was trying to pretend like he was going to shoot them so that they would shoot him, because people know that when they're doing something like that, they're going to die, and there's a reasonable likelihood that they're going to die, and they're kind of like, in some cultures you're a hero and whatever, but like either way, that person, no one would have blamed the cop for shooting. In the end, he didn't. But I don't disagree. I think like a few years ago, there was a case also in Israel, and everyone was freaking out at the soldier who killed the person and putting so much resources into investigating when all he did was save lives. So I don't disagree with you. I just, otherwise, like, we would never make sure that someone did the right thing, and if possible, didn't kill when it wasn't necessary. Any other questions? Or
I'm just curious, where are the tsugiyo on Bava Machteret? I know there's the section in Sanhedrin when it like related to killing him, but isn't there also a bunch in Bava Kama?
In Bava Kama of Hababa Machteret?
Or maybe not.
So, I mean, the ones I gave were all in Sanhedrin.
Like not just like the consequences in killing, but also like how you define it. Like what does Baba Machteret mean, and like how do we get to this idea of threat?
It could be it's also there's some it could be there's something I don't remember. I know the major sugyas about Baba Machteret in Sanhedrin. That's where the Mishnah comes from. But I can look up also. It's very possible a lot of the times the Gemaras will quote each other and go on tangents or whatever. Okay, let me Hadassah, you had a question before?
No, guys, I figured.
Okay. So there's this interesting case in Shmuel Bet that I gave you, and I apologize if it's somewhat confusing, but I'm some of you are at some point, I assume all of you have learned this, so I'll try to go through it slowly, and if anyone needs me to reiterate any points, please let me know. I see I have 5 minutes left, so I'll do my best to wrap up by 8. There was a guy who, after Shaul HaMelech passed away, David was meant to become king. That was what the Nevi'im at the time said. That's what Shmuel said. But there was someone who was challenging him for the throne, Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth had a general whose name was Avner, and David, who was supposed to be the other king, had a general whose name was Yoav. Ishbosheth, there was a battle between the two camps, and Asael, who was a supporter of David and also Yoav's brother, chased after Avner. So Avner, remember, was originally the general of Shaul, and now he's the general of Ishbosheth. So he's chasing after Avner, and he backed him into a corner. And when he reached him, Avner killed him out of self-defense. So Yoav, who was Asael's brother, Asael had died, Avner had killed him. Yoav went to kill Avner to avenge his brother's death. He was the Goel Hadam. In the Torah, we have this allowance that if someone kills someone, the relatives of the person who died are allowed to go avenge the blood of their relative until the killer runs away to an Ir Miklat and he's kind of a safe haven. And so the Gemara comments that Yoav was allowed to kill Avner because even though, and this is like the key part here, even though Avner only killed Asael in self-defense, he could have saved himself by injuring the person and he didn't have to kill Asel. So essentially the Gemara is bothered by the following point. Why is Yoav allowed to go kill Avner if Avner was totally justified in killing Asel? So Asel runs at him, and Avner is completely justified, and Yoav's allowed to then go and kill Avner, no problem, because he could have, and the answer to the Gemara is because he could have just injured him, and he could have injured Asel and not actually killed him. And so then, therefore, Avner was guilty of murder, and Yoav was allowed to be the Gol Adam and kill Avner. So if you recall, the Rambam said that even though it's not allowed to kill someone when you could have used non-lethal force, we don't prosecute a case like that. We don't allow, Beis Din doesn't kill that person. So the Ravid, who's a commentator on the Rambam, uses this as proof that the Rambam is wrong. That the Rambam must be wrong, because if the Rambam was correct, Yoav would not have been allowed to kill Avner. And if he was, again, if Beit Din prosecutes cases like this, then it would have been allowed. But clearly the Rambam's wrong, and so the Ravid said that this is proof that someone who could have used non-lethal force and uses lethal force, according to the Ravid, would be prosecuted and would be put to death for that. Now, there's a few different opinions of how we reconcile this Rambam, and if we say the Rambam's wrong. One of them is one thing I quoted earlier, that it could be because it was an ambush, so it was a little bit different. It could be also, if you use the opinion of Rashi, since Avner himself was the victim, if you hold according to the opinion of Rashi, if Avner himself is the victim, he's allowed to go and use lethal force, even if he could have used non-lethal force, because he himself is the victim and he's not a witness. But there's a lot of disputes here. I'm not going to get into it too much, just because we're pretty much out of time. I just want to finish off with Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was once asked the following question. If anyone's interested in this topic, there's a lot more that could be said. I apologize if I was a little bit unclear because of being a little rushed at the end. But Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach once answered the following question. So let's say someone comes up to me, puts a gun to my head, and says, "Eat this piece of blueberry pie or I'll kill you." Do I have to comply to his wishes? That's what Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is asked. And his conclusion is no. Meaning, obviously, the easiest way for me to save my life is to eat the blueberry pie. However, if I decide that I have an opportunity to kill this person, I'm allowed to kill him, even though my life wasn't really threatened, because I could have just eaten the pie. And his justification for saying that is based on this Gemara of Hababa Machteret. So back to the beginning, we said, if someone is tunneling into my home, I'm allowed to kill them. Rav Shlomo Zalman said there's an easy solution that we could have said that the person's able to do. Why doesn't the homeowner just leave out the back door? Someone's tunneling into his house, the homeowner could easily leave out the back door. But we say that no, he doesn't have to. He's allowed to protect his property. And so it doesn't matter if there's an easy way out. If someone's coming at you to kill you, if you yourself are the victim, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he felt that you could do whatever it takes to protect yourself. And according to that, he says that if someone's coming onto your property, even if you could use non-lethal force, or even if you could, let's say, run away from your property, the whole concept of stand your ground law in America and Canada also is the concept that you don't have to give up your property. You don't have to give up your money and possessions, even though by not doing so, it's going to lead to someone dying. You could just run out the backyard and leave, but you don't have to, at least in Halacha, because of this case of Hababa Machteres. There's a lot more that I kind of skipped over. I apologize. Some things I went over pretty quickly, but I see it's 8:02, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. Any questions though before we finish? Okay. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that made some sense. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free. You can always email me, text me, get my contact information from Shira if you don't have it. Otherwise, have a great night.
Get a free bagel, going bagels.
And you can always get a free bagel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Have a great night.
Thank you.